Welcome to the Sub 1000 Recruitment Podcast. With so much of the recruitment industry conversation aimed at big enterprise talent acquisition teams, we decided recruiters at smaller everyday organizations need to be heard. In 2023, we launched our free-to-join Sub 1000 online community. We have thousands of in-house recruiters and HR professionals from everyday organizations who recruit less than 1,000 staff a year, in some cases less than 100. And if you are listening to this, you've probably guessed the next bit. We've also launched a podcast to hear direct from those recruiters. Their stories, insights and experiences about how they get the job done on a limited budget with limited support in either a small team or perhaps completely on their own. Tune in every fortnight to hear from your direct peers. And if you want to get involved, join our free online community at sub1000.com.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Sub 1000 podcast. Today we're joined by Esther, who has over 10 years recruitment experience in the creative space, looking at attracting top talent. Thanks for being here today, Esther. So we start the podcast off with the same two questions. So the first question will be, tell us how you first entered recruitment. And the second question is just a little bit more about your experience today. So question one, Esther, tell us how you started out in recruitment.
Well, first of all, Ben, thank you for having me. In terms of my background, before moving into recruitment, I worked in media sales, B2B media sales for over 11 years. And I ended up falling into recruitment like a lot of media sales people. My first role in recruitment was with somebody I'd previously worked with in media sales. And I think it just sort of continued from there. So I worked recruitment agency side, various different agencies, mainly in the creative space. Then I wanted to do something different. And then since then, I've been in-house for, various different companies. So companies that people would have heard of, such as, Publicis, Saatchi & Saatchi, Leo Burnett. And then more recently, I suppose done something a little bit different. And now I'm currently working for a premium beauty brand.
So thanks for that little intro there on kind of how you got into recruitment, Esther. So can you just tell us a little bit about your experience today, maybe some of the recent roles you've held and maybe some of the projects you've worked on?
So I think in most of my career, I worked on everything from entry-level roles right through to C-suite leadership roles and everything in between, and whether that be in the UK or the US, APAC, Europe. So it's been a real mix. And I think lots of different roles as well, from project managers to producers to sales to HR to retail staff. I think it's been a real mix, which is I think what keeps me on my toes.
So you've had a real kind of mix in terms of type of roles you've had to recruit for, different locations, UK and outside of the UK as well. So why do you think, a positive candidate experience is important?
I think when I started in recruitment, and I know it's still like this today, there's some you just hear horror stories, and I didn't have, I had some pretty poor experiences. And one thing that all these years, 10, 12 years later, however long I've been doing this, one thing that has always stayed with me is the candidate experience, because, I want people to have a positive experience, because I think, there's so many values, and I've had such a poor experience. I always, when I'm talking to candidates and I'm interviewing candidates, I always put them, the candidate in my shoes, and I treat people how I'd want to be treated. So that's something that has always stayed with me. And there's lots of reasons why it's so important. When candidates have a good experience, they're more likely to accept the job offer, become engaged, and be productive employees. They're more likely to refer other talented individuals to join your company. So that's a key a key thing. You want people, even if they don't get the job, you want each candidate who comes through your doors to leave wanting to work for your company. So that's something I always try to sort of instill in the whole process. Other things that I think are important. If you think nowadays everybody goes on the likes of Glassdoor and Indeed, if you think of those sites, you can put a review just on companies you've interviewed with. So I just think, having that positive experience is crucial when you think of, a positive candidate experience can really enhance your company reputation and, your branding. There's so many things I could talk about. There's a long-term impact. If the amount of people I've spoken to over the years who I've kept in touch with, or because they've had a positive experience, perhaps they haven't, got the job, but, a year, 2 years later, they'll see the opportunity again and apply. And that's happened, time and time again because they've had a positive experience. So that's, another reason, competitive advantage. If you think of the job market at the moment, companies that do provide a really good positive experience, they're more likely to get that top talent. Candidates nowadays have lots of choices. It's very, I think times have changed since I first started looking for a job. Candidates are more likely to choose companies that treat them well throughout that whole process. There's the whole cost, the cost saving, if you think of how expensive it is to hire nowadays. So having a really thorough, robust and positive experience can help reduce the costs. I suppose so those are just a few, I suppose, of the reasons why it's crucial to provide a positive candidate experience. I'm sure I could go on and on, but I think those are a few of the sort of key points for me that really stood out.
We also know that a positive candidate experience is important, but have you got any advice or tips or maybe examples of what makes a positive candidate experience, things that people can do to really help enhance and provide a bit of a wow factor?
I think, every candidate wants to feel, valued, respected and engaged throughout the entire process. From the moment that I message someone on LinkedIn or whatever it may be, right through that whole process to, whether they get the job or not. It's having, I think, that clear communication, effective and transparent communication, providing candidates throughout the journey, about the job, keeping them informed of the application process, managing their expectations, keeping them informed about their status and progress, I think is crucial. Making it relatively easy for candidates to apply for jobs. Some of the application forms I've seen recently, people are spending sort of half an hour, 40 minutes filling some form out, and then it just disappears into the ether and you never hear from them again, which I don't think really gives candidates much, it just doesn't bode well for the candidate in terms of that communication. If you never hear from a company again after you've just spent 40 minutes filling out a form. So I think, making it easy and just having the crucial questions on there that you really need, rather than pages and pages of information that you think, is this really necessary? And it's timing as well. Getting back to people when you say you'll get back to them, just avoiding leaving candidates in the dark for long periods of time, even if it's just checking in with them and apologising that you haven't got an update, I think is really important, and something just so they know they haven't been forgotten about and the reason there is a delay. So it goes back to that sort of respect, giving them constructive feedback, not ghosting them, I think is really important. In terms of other things, I think what would make a positive candidate experience, going back to the job descriptions, making sure that, that, the outlines are clearly there, what is expected of them, just trying to get all the information in a sort of clear and succinct way, not having some vague job descriptions that are over promising the candidate. I think it is key. And again, having a engaging and efficient interview process, just making sure the candidate knows what the process is, whether that be putting that process on the job description right from the offset, or perhaps right at that first screening call, just telling the candidate what the process is. I also think it's that positive in onboarding as well. So once the candidate has come on board, that's a whole sort of another I think another conversation, but it sort of carries on right through that onboarding of a candidate. And you said, it's sort of treating those candidates with respect, which I think could only help attract the top talent and build a strong talent pipeline for the future.
So Esther, I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you've talked about dealing and running recruitment both as a hiring manager and as an in-house recruiter. Yeah. But you've also mentioned that you've also experienced it as a candidate. You've talked about that on your LinkedIn profile. So could you share, for your own personal experience being a job seeker, what were some of the good and maybe some of the bad you experienced based around candidate experience?
I've had some horror stories over the years. Kept in reception for hours, for 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes. I had, it was a very long time ago, one of my first ever interviews. The hiring manager just did all the talking, and at the end of the interview, it was a very quick interview after he'd kept me waiting in reception for a very long time. His one question to me was, "What's your name?" That was quite awful. I've had the good cop, bad cop, which I think is very, I don't even know what decade that is, 70s, 80s, which is, some really awful interviews. I've had an interview in a cafe where the hiring manager spent most of his time flirting with the waitress. Interviews where the hiring manager has been on their phone, feet on the table, taking calls. And it's just, that lack of respect, really. There's some absolute horror stories. But in terms of positive experience, it's when I have been, given a clear job description, outlined what the process is. I've had a positive interview process, and then I've had feedback constructive feedback when in a timely fashion. So that's something I always try, if I think of some of the horror stories the awful experiences I've had, I always keep that in mind and always get back to people when I say I'll get back to them, and just make sure that whole process is clear. At the end of the day, it's very much a two-way street. You want to, hire the people that are right for your business, but it's got to be right for the candidate as well. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
And when we think about the recruitment process, Esther, how have you approached maybe in previous roles, or maybe what you're doing in your current company right now? How have you looked to make the process as inclusive as possible, and how have you tried to maybe reduce any bias?
So some of the things that I've done, in my current role, we ripped apart the job description. I worked with a copywriter in terms of looking at the job descriptions, which at the time were very long, very wordy. So just really stripping it back, having the sort of tone of the company, using that sort of the kind of language that is inclusive. I'm wanting to encourage candidates from a diverse background. So I've really looked at the language. I've sort of stripped back. What do we really want? What are the essential qualifications that we need? I've avoided putting in requirements just for the sake of it. When I put a job, I advertise a role, I never have more than 6 bullet points, because I think from various, channels, I've heard that, having far too many bullet points, people from ethnic backgrounds are less likely to apply. Women are less likely to apply if they don't feel they meet every single requirement. So 6 is my absolute maximum of requirements in any job advert. So that's what I've done with the job adverts and job descriptions. Recently, in my current role, we have very structured interviews. We have for a first interview, we have competency-based questions for each particular role. And we also have evaluation criteria, and that's for every single candidate, just so we're consistent. And we have a scoring system as well to assess candidates objectively. Each interview will have a minimum of 2 people and a maximum of 3. And I try to have a diverse group of interviewers in the meeting just to minimize bias. I know some companies are doing blind resume, CV screening. That's not something I've done, but I do hear of other companies doing it. And I think as well, in terms of just feedback, getting feedback from candidates, on their experience. Not in this company, but in my last company, if somebody had got quite far down the stage and the interview stage, even if they hadn't got the job, I would send out a very short 2 or 3 questions feedback form, just to gauge their experience, look at what we did do well, but more importantly, what we didn't do well, what we could improve on. So that's something that we did, and we'd conduct regular audits to improve the hiring process, uncover and address any bias. And I think it's just being transparent with candidates about the hiring process, letting them know the steps are involved, the timelines, and what they can expect. And it's just something that, we refer back to, quarterly, to look how we can improve the process.
Esther, could you just tell me a little bit about your onboarding experience and how you try to obviously, continue with that candidate experience after an offer's been accepted?
So, it's very much about communication. I will always put an offer to somebody over the phone or on a Teams call, never on email. And then once that person has hopefully accepted, I will work with HR. We will congratulate them on the new job, welcome them to the company. Again, it's using a language and tone of voice which mirrors the company. And then it's sort of keeping the new starters informed and engaged, but without hounding them. So we will sort of stagger emails, because there's obviously we want to welcome them, but there's information we need, sort of references, what technology they may need. So it's sending out information in a timely fashion, so they're engaged without feeling they're just being harassed continually. And then some candidates have quite a long notice period, so I'll call them, get in touch with them, just so they've got that touch point. And then, when it comes to them starting, again, there's lots of behind the scenes stuff going on, making sure that there's sort of, workspace, equipment, everything is ready. If they're physically coming into the office, we lay their desk out. We've got a little goodie box ready for them. And then, on their first day, we'll have a welcome lunch. What I like to do is message the new starter beforehand and give them a list of restaurants that just in the local area, just so they feel that it's up to them, that they make the decision on where they want to go for lunch, just to make them feel part of the team. And so I think, all that stuff before they start is really important, keeping them engaged, informed on what's going on, and sort of setting those guidelines. Again, behind the scenes before they start, we'll have a very thorough induction for new starters. We'll have a very deep, HR will spend a couple of hours with them. It'll be all the sort of health and safety, fire inductions, showing them around the office, where things are in the local area, where, banks, post office, good places to go for lunch. So, and then all will have meetings in the diary with key members of staff. We'll book in any sort of training, any regular meetings in their diary. We'll set up a buddy or a mentorship program just to sort of help, I suppose, new employees sort of settle in, and helping them to, network and build relationships. Then something I always do, and I've done for years, a month in, I will always check in on candidates on how they're getting on. I will ask them how the onboarding process was, from me reaching out to them in the first instance right through to the onboarding, and again, what we can do, what we're doing well, what we can improve on. So just having a very, very informal sort of catch up to sort of get their feedback. Is there any training gaps? And just to really sort of encourage open and honest communication, and then and taking that information so I can work with HR in using it to improve the process.
Given the changing expectations with Gen Zs and perhaps the younger generations coming into the the workplace now and further into the future, what advice or maybe guidance can you offer to help perhaps engage with younger workforce?
So I think a lot of the sort of engaging and recruiting and onboarding of Gen Z, I think a lot of it will still apply to everybody else. I think what perhaps is different is perhaps the way we attract talent in the first instance, using social media more. Really utilizing sort of digital communication for recruitment. And are we doing anything that can be done? Looking at apps, looking at virtual reality, augmented reality. So just, I suppose, making the most of, technology just to attract that sort of younger workforce. I think another thing that's really important, and I think, to get the best talent, you need to be offering flexible working hours, remote working, options, just to accommodate people's work-life balance. And it's, Gen Z aren't used to working in an office 5 days a week. So I do think if you want to attract, that sort of age group, you need to be looking at that flexibility and really highlighting it on your website and in your job descriptions. Talking of job descriptions, I think you really need to pull out the company's mission, the values, and their sort of social responsibility initiatives. I think that's really key. I know when I talk to Gen Z, it comes up a lot in the conversations. Perhaps in my company, they'll flag up the values, what we're doing with the charities that we represent. So I think that's really crucial and something that you need to really highlight on your website and bring it to the front, because it is such a key point for Gen Z. And another thing, and I think this goes for everybody, it is professional development. It's ongoing training. It's creating from the get-go, creating clear career paths for skill development, for growth. It's offering mentorship, regular feedback. So I think this is something that's really crucial. It's that ongoing training and development, and having that clear path on, if I do this, and this, will I get to this? And just having that sort of regular check-in. So I think that's, very important. Another thing that sort of comes up a lot is, prioritizing mental and physical well-being. What are companies doing? What are we doing? And in terms of wellness programs and resources, and again, sort of checking in on that work-life balance, encouraging employees to take a break, even little things like go out for a walk at lunchtime, getting away from their screens. So, so that's one thing. And in terms of other sort of benefits, I know we've already sort of touched on mental health, but, keeping packages up to date that do appeal to that demographic, sort of benefits that benefits that I suppose appeal to are a bit more sort of modern, and that, pensions and healthcare perhaps don't appeal to Gen Z at the moment. So it's looking at other benefits that are going to be more appealing. So I think those are, I suppose, a few areas that would, attract sort of that sort of Gen Z, sort of, generation. So yeah, the sort of flexibility, again, there's a commitment to diversity and inclusion, and that continuous training and development.
So everybody, we've reached the end of another Sub 1000 podcast. So Esther, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. Everybody, Esther is a member of the Sub 1000 community. So Esther, are you happy for people to message to you, tag you in posts if they want to kind of delve into maybe some of the topics you've touched on today?
Yeah, absolutely happy to help.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, Esther, for your time today.
No problem. Thanks, Ben.